Okay, so Crash Bandicoot, despite being a series of games less than 15 long, has really been around the block during its tenure of the last 20 years, mostly because it's been in a game of corporate patty cake going back and forth between teams ever since it left the capable hands of Naughty Dog, and while a lot of experiments were tried to get Crash back onto his furry feet as a lively series coming back every couple of years, none of them really panned out to any long-term success. During that time of everybody looking at the furry mascot and shrugging, one company that stepped up to stare uncomfortably at the mascot was Vicarious Visions, a company that, surprisingly, is still around in the modern day, having been acquired by Activision 15 years ago, when the company was still worth a damn. Vicarious Visions is a startlingly prolific developer, pumping out constant portable titles, with a few console entries here and there, with 95% of their output being licensed products and working on portable versions of multi-platform tie-ins, and if this description is starting to make your eyeballs twitch in remembrance of one of this channel's infamous friends, then you may be onto something we'll see later. Huge Adventure was Vicarious's first attempt to get Crash onto the portable scene, and was an early showing on the Game Boy Advance, which is an explanation, and definitely not an excuse for the game that you're looking at right now, but we'll get into that later. The game centered around yet another one of Cortex's ridiculous and dastardly tricks to take over the world, by shrinking it down to the size of a beach ball using yet another orbital space station laboratory. Obviously, Crash has been caught in the trap and now has to get around the tiny version of the planet in order to collect crystals and defeat Cortex's goons in order to stop his evil plan and save the world. And while all of that sounds like an eye-catching premise on paper, Vicarious Vision's ironic lack of a vision serves to undermine it at every turn. The most obvious way is that all of the plot is delivered in the classic beginning cutscene and ending cutscene, with no dialogue in the middle of the game to keep the player's interest, and the cutscenes are so low quality that they comprise of like 5 to 10 screens of dialogue with no voice acting and barely any music accompaniment, or even simple animation to make it feel like the game even gives a shit about what's happening on its own turf. Most damningly of all, there is no attempt at comedy throughout the entire game. The game still looks cartoonish because Vicarious is simply borrowing the game's thematic elements from its console counterparts, but nowhere in this game is anyone attempting to toss in some classic cartoon gaffes or quips, which in a Crash game is like 40% of the final score. I don't know how you even look at the original trilogy and think that this omission would have been a good idea, or hell, even something that would have not been noticed by anybody. Hell, even that stupid premise that I mentioned before is played completely straight by all of the characters. Another amazingly stupid decision, and another one that makes this game feel more boring than painting your bathroom completely gray. The main issue behind all of this is that Vicarious Visions made this game on the cheap and as quickly as possible because for whatever reason, the people behind Vicarious decided to follow the N-Space business model that led to that company going under for being untalented and a total waste of space. But the difference is that Vicarious actually changed from their business strategy of developing 7 games every year down to a more sensible one, and being able to focus on just one franchise under Activision, which seems to have saved this company. Out of nowhere in the modern day, Vicarious Visions were the ones that put together the Insane Trilogy, which, looking at Huge Adventure, is the most ironic twist in video game history I've ever heard of. While the company may be on their feet now, this game that they pushed to market in 2002 has zero excuse for what it is. Laziest shovelware of the highest order. The levels are boring filler, essentially borrowing all of its design ideas from the original trilogy without any additional thought. The levels are short, lazy, dull, and they look like pixelated vomit compared to their console counterparts. Ultimately, the entire bulk of the game is a pack of levels taken directly from the original trilogy and reproduced in worse quality on every level, with no new ideas on the table to make this portable outing worthwhile to any player. I cover a lot of retro titles on this channel because we just cover the history of franchises. So this next part may sound incredibly unfair from me, but this game's graphics are god-awful. They're pixelated, compressed, totally unappealing, and a blurry mess of a recreated art style. Everything in Huge Adventure is ad-libbed terribly from older Crash games, and the PlayStation ones were actually able to make that kind of stuff work due to its internal consistency, and it actually looked appealing in that early 3D kind of way. But Vicarious was so ham-fisted at the same thing that it came out looking like bargain basement crap. Look, when all you are doing is stealing ideas from a different game and copying them officially for yours, the game you are going to make is going to be eventually compared to the original one, and the fans are going to play your game. So if you fail to do a good job at the copy, then you have failed even more publicly than if you made the game totally original. Because when you are a part of a franchise, there are expectations, and if you fail to meet them, then your garbage game is going to be even more obvious and smellier as a result. The reason I wanted to point that out in the first place is that this isn't a Game Boy or a Game Boy Color game, where you have a wholesale excuse for bad graphics. This is the goddamned Game Boy Advance. Superstar Saga, Mario Kart Super Circuit, the third generation of Pokemon. Hell, there was even a goddamned Mega Man game spin-off launch on this console. And you are coming here with this cut-rate nonsense? This console is the place where Aria of Sorrow was launched, so Vicarious has no excuse for lugging out this amateur hour shit, because this console could clearly output games running much higher end sprites, backgrounds, and effects. And on top of that, the soundtrack is garbage as well. I was listening to some of the game working on the boss videos in this series, and it's some of the most laughably composed pieces of white noise I've ever heard. The original trilogy never really had the most banging of music ever written, not some of the most remembered stuff in all of video games, but some of those tracks were rightfully iconic. So again, there is zero excuse for why Vicarious couldn't have done better being a part of a larger franchise that was making some money. I'm glad that Vicarious finally hunkered down and made a commitment to aim for quality after 2010, but this type of embarrassing shovelware that for whatever god-awful reason they were glad to put their name on in 2002 should serve as a warning to anybody who wants to bank their entire company on solely producing bottom-tier rubbish in order to earn easy paychecks, because that shit eventually wears out if you don't ship up your productions to some sort of moderate quality. Ultimately, this game is shamelessly lazy GBA shovelware. The most insulting thing to me is that this game is so lacking in creative interest from its own creators that I was able to blaze through the entire thing in under 2.5 hours. Huge Adventure is a fucking joke on the part of consumers because at some point, this game was on a shelf, hopefully for about 10 minutes before it got put in the bargain bin, and it was trying to be sold for actual dollars, when in reality, this game is so bizarrely terrible that it's barely worth the time to emulate it just to check it out. Huge Adventure is a total waste of development time, the time of its consumers, blank cartridges, and serves as a despicably short amount of nothing to use to kill some downtime that would have been better spent doing your damn taxes or repainting your house. The game doesn't do anything new with Crash, doesn't have an interesting story or jokes to tell, no new villains, no new tricks or traps, and no new fun challenges put onto the handheld space. Hell, something that's going to be seen in all these Vicarious games is that they decided to lock the real ending behind 100% completionism, which we are not going to see in any of these videos because frankly I have better things to do than trying to attempt to collect all of the collectibles in a game this insulting and shoddy. The premise is shithouse, with no thought put in or any attempt to change up the gameplay formula using the premise, or even trying to use it to make some damn jokes. Clearly, Huge Adventure was made just so Vicarious Visions could cash a check. And on every single damn level, they obviously do not care about the game they were making and just want it out of the door as soon as possible. Damn the consequences to our brand value. Hell, I feel like I somehow put more passion into this game than its actual make, and I could barely find things to talk about to fill up 2 pages of this drivel that I'm saying right now. Well, since I tossed that in, might as well just get the final scoreboard on screen. And wish you all out there a victory for gamers for stomaching this mediocre crap with me. I suppose I can just say what I said when I finally finished this game as a nice cap on this whole video. At least this bullshit was short and got out of the way.